Secondly, this global prestige of science, unfortunately, can be used for ideological agendas that aren't often helpful. Let me say why. First of all, I'll be indiscreet enough to name the obvious, which may not be named elsewhere. The very name of this session, the global imperative, we wouldn't actually have without the sciences. It's the sciences that tell us we live on a globe rather than a square. So science has immense power to resolve very specific kinds of questions. It's not very good at telling us what's right and wrong, and it's not very good at telling us what the purpose of human life is, but it's really good at telling us what shape the Earth is and where it's located in the solar system and how old the Earth is. And it's the ability of science to furnish persuasive answers to these kinds of questions that has resulted, for example, in the notion of the global shape of world itself becoming global knowledge. There may be no other human intellectual enterprise that has so successfully generated authentically global conversation. And because of this, sometimes its prestige is used to either attack or affirm religious convictions in a way that don't honor the science itself. And then also, unfortunately, sometimes, and I regret to say it's usually religious people in our own tradition, retreat from the global conversation and they invent their own brand of science. Now, what we're trying to do at Westmont is something really, really risky. On the one hand, we don't want to blow about with every fad of science. And we certainly don't want to be blown down by things like the new atheism that is using science to attack religion. But on the other hand, we don't want to invent our own brand, our own Christian brand of science. So we're seeking this balanced approach to affirming the integrity of science and equipping students to enter into a global conversation, not doing their own brand, but nevertheless reflecting on science as Christians. And thirdly, and lastly, I want to just agree with Warren that science has had global impact. So Jonas Salk has developed a cure for polio. Norman Borlaug won the Nobel Prize for introducing us to the Green Revolution. But not all the impacts of science are positive. In fact, even the Green Revolution itself isn't only positive. Sometimes it's difficult to distinguish the positive and negative impacts because scientific knowledge proceeds at a pace faster than our ethical capacity to evaluate its impacts. And I'm a little embarrassed that my own discipline has made a lot of mistakes. So there are a lot of ecologists who have given doom-casting exaggerations of environmental problems that have turned out not to exist at the scale originally thought. But on the other hand, there have been a lot of people, and again, I regret to say a lot of evangelicals who have dismissed environmental problems altogether. And the fact is we do have global environmental problems. If the modern-day Babel is probably not a tower that reaches to the heavens, but it may be a smokestack that fouls the heavens. And if the heavens declare the glory of God, every time we foul the heavens and reduce our ability to see stars, and by the way, there are about 20 major cities in the world right now where you cannot see stars at night, we're extinguishing the testimony of creation. So I want to close by mentioning that an inauguration is not a memorial service. It's not a time only to Gail's saying, hope not. No. It's not a time only to look back on what we've done and recognize the great job that we've done in the past. I think in those first two areas, we actually have done a great job at Westmont. But on this third area, in spite of the rich legacy of Christian accomplishment in this area, from the prophetic tradition to the church fathers, to the Franciscan tradition and Anabaptist traditions, North American evangelicals have not done a good job. And neither has Westmont. But we have a plan. An inauguration is a time to look at new challenges ahead of us. And we actually have a plan on campus to do better. I see Roy and Deanne Goebel sitting out of the audience. Those are two Westmont alums who have launched several international ministries to care for the environment and care for the poor. So I'm excited about this last thing, what we can do at a global scale in the name of Christ, using sciences to care for his creation. Thanks.
Warren talked a little bit about technological competitiveness on the global scale, and I'd like to talk a little bit about science literacy on a global scale. According to a yearly poll administered by the National Science Foundation, over half of U.S. adults do not know which is smaller, an electron or an atom. The same poll found that over 70% of U.S. adults do not understand enough science to read the science articles in most national newspapers. Warren mentioned a little bit about the results in our high school students, and those are even worse. An ongoing study entitled PISA measures scholastic performance in 15-year-olds around the world. Out of the 41 countries who participated in 2003, North American students scored 29th out of 41. We came in 29th out of 41, even though, 1, we were the wealthiest nation of those 41, 2, we spend the most per capita on education. In other words, we have the most resources, we spend the most money, and our performance was in the lowest 1/3. These results are unfortunate for a number of reasons, some of which Warren has already elaborated on. From our perspective as a Christian liberal arts college, however, there are other reasons that I think these results are unfortunate. The first reason is that a lack of science literacy robs people of a certain degree of personal happiness and fulfillment. Linus Pauling, a Nobel Prize-winning chemist who I had the privilege of meeting before he died, once said, "I feel sorry for people who do not understand anything about chemistry. They are missing out on an important source of happiness." Now, you don't often hear chemistry and happiness together in the same sentence. But I actually agree with Pauling. In fact, if someone were to ask me what I thought one of the most exciting ideas around was, my answer would be this, and that is that the behavior of matter is determined by the properties of molecules and atoms. This is the reason that I love chemistry. We have been able to study substances around us and understand their behavior based on particles that are so small that they can hardly be imagined. But let me try to get you to imagine it for a minute. Suppose you go down to your favorite beach and you pick up a grain of sand. Think about how small that is. And then look across and look at how many grains of sand there are on the entire beach. There are actually more atoms in that grain of sand than there are grains of sand on the beach. That's how small these particles are. And yet their properties determine the properties of everything we see. Let me give you one quick example. Think about water. You've all probably seen water molecules or pictures of water molecules, right? An oxygen atom in the middle joined to 2 hydrogen atoms, a bond angle of 104.5 degrees. Pretty simple. Change that bond angle by just a tiny amount, and water would be a drastically different substance. In fact, if you open it up by just a few degrees, water would be a gas at room temperature instead of a liquid. Imagine that. Change one bond angle in one molecule by a few degrees, you have no oceans, no rivers, no life, and no Gail Beebe. To never have understood the sensitivity of the world that we can see to the world that we cannot see is like never having heard a Beethoven symphony, or like never having seen a sculpture by Michelangelo. It robs you of an amazing and unforgettable experience about the world and the human ability to understand it. The second reason that a lack of science literacy is unfortunate from our perspective as a Christian liberal arts college is that a scientifically illiterate population makes poor citizens. For example, although I am also fairly sympathetic to the environmental movement, as Jeff said, a lack of literacy even within that movement and the resulting anti-environmental backlash creates confusion that impedes real progress and opens the door to what could be misinformed policies. I have heard conservative pundits, for example, say that volcanoes emit more carbon dioxide, the most significant greenhouse gas, than petroleum combustion. I have heard a liberal environmentalist right here on campus say that we have to stop using hairspray because it is causing holes in the ozone layer that would lead to global warming. Well, the claim about volcanoes emitting more carbon dioxide than petroleum combustion can be refuted by the basic tools of freshman chemistry. We can easily show that volcanoes only emit 1/50th of the amount of carbon dioxide as petroleum combustion. As for hairspray depleting ozone that leads to global warming, the CFCs that deplete ozone have been banned from hairspray since 1978, and ozone depletion has nothing to do with global warming anyway. You see, politicians can conveniently distort the truth before an ill-informed electorate, which is why the electorate needs to be informed.